Some figures just cast such a long, dark shadow over history. Omar al-Bashir, definitely one of them.
Absolutely. 30 years ruling Sudan.
Yeah, and a period that saw some truly, truly horrific human rights abuses right here in the 21st century.
It's hard to comprehend sometimes.
So this isn't just about listing dates and events. We're really trying to get into the core of his rule in this deep dive. We've got this extensive exploration to work from. And, well, the mission today is to understand the key pieces. How did this military guy rise so high?
Right, all the way to being accused of genocide.
Exactly. And what did those atrocities actually look like for the people there?
Yeah.
And ultimately, how did his 3 decades in power finally end?
It's a critical story, and it really shows how quickly things can go wrong. Think about June 1989. Sudan was, well, it was in a terrible state.
Perfect storm, almost.
Pretty much. Internal conflict, the economy was just tanking, huge political instability.
And that's when Bashir stepped in.
That's the moment. He was a major then, Omar al-Bashir. Led a military coup, kicked out the democratically elected government of Sadiq al-Mahdi.
Okay, but he wasn't acting alone, right? There was support.
Crucial point. He had the backing of the National Islamic Front, the NIF, and their leader, Hassan al-Turabi.
Ah, the NIF. And they had a specific agenda.
Oh, absolutely. They were pushing hard to implement strict Islamic law, Sharia law, across the entire country, not just the north.
So the pitch was stability, bring order to the chaos.
That was the initial message, yeah. A firm hand needed.
But it didn't quite work out that way.
Not even close. It very quickly turned into this really harsh, oppressive, authoritarian regime.
Any disagreement just squashed.
Brutally.
Yeah.
Shut down completely. And the military became, well, everything. The dominant force in society.
So what were the first moves?
Almost immediately, Bashir declared a state of emergency. That meant suspending the Constitution.
The rule book, basically.
Gone. And then dissolving all political opposition. Wipe them out.
And that NIF alliance,
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned it deepened divisions.
Massively. Because their policies, their push for Sharia law everywhere, it just inflamed all those existing fault lines. Ethnic differences, religious ones, regional tensions.
It poured fuel on the fire.
Exactly. It's kind of a classic example, really, of how a religiously motivated political movement can exploit those pre-existing cracks in society to grab and hold on to power.
And those deepening divisions, tragically, they became the fertile ground for even worse conflict, didn't they?
Terribly so. I mean, the source material reminds us there was already the first Sudanese civil war, but Bashir's move, imposing Sharia law, that just reignited everything.
Leading to the Second Sudanese Civil War.
Right, which lasted from 83 to 2005, the estimated death toll. It's staggering, maybe 2 million people.
2 million. It's almost impossible to grasp.
And you have to understand, imposing Sharia in the South, which was mostly non-Muslim, it directly broke earlier agreements that had actually brought some peace.
So it was almost guaranteed to cause more conflict.
You could say that. It was incredibly destabilizing. But beyond that North-South war, our exploration really takes us into the horror of Darfur.
Darfur. Yeah, that kicked off around 2003.
It did. In Western Sudan, you had several ethnic minority groups there, the Fur, the Masalit, the Zagawa.
And they felt marginalized by Bashir's government.
Increasingly so. Discriminated against, pushed aside. So they rebelled.
And the regime's response.
Unbelievably brutal. It's vital to understand this wasn't just a reaction. It was a deliberate, planned, brutal counterinsurgency campaign.
Aimed not just at rebels, but
at the civilians. Systematically targeting the civilian populations of those specific ethnic groups.
This is where the Janjaweed come in.
Exactly. These government-backed militias. They were basically given, well, carte blanche, free rein to commit the most horrific atrocities imaginable.
The details we have are just stomach churning.
They really are. Widespread killings, systematic rape used as a weapon of war.
Burning entire villages down.
Yes, and forcing millions of people from their homes. Systematic displacement, the sheer scale of it. It's hard to process.
Did the world notice?
Oh, yes. The international community saw the gravity. The UN, numerous human rights groups, they officially called the Darfur conflict genocide.
Genocide, that's a heavy word.
It is. The death toll estimates are over 300,000. Millions displaced. Our sources detail villages just wiped off the map, the deliberate, systematic rape of women and girls.
Horrifying tactics.
And even abducting children, forcing them to become fighters. It's just staggering that this could happen on such a scale.
And Bashir himself, what was his reaction to the international condemnation?
Pure defiance. He just brushed it all off, called it foreign interference, trying to meddle in Sudan's affairs.
No acknowledgement of the atrocities at all.
None publicly. Complete refusal to accept responsibility for what was happening under his command.
So this defiance, it extended to international law too, right? The ICC got involved.
It did. In 2005, a big step. The UN Security Council referred the Darfur situation to the International Criminal Court, the ICC.
Which is based in The Hague.
That's right. Their job is prosecuting individuals for the most serious international crimes: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity.
So that referral kicked off investigation.
Exactly, into Bashir's role in Darfur. And by 2009, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for him.
For what charges specifically?
War crimes and crimes against humanity. That covered mass killing, torture, and that horrific use of rape as a weapon of war.
And then it got even more serious.
Yes. In 2010, they added the charge of genocide.
Making him the first sitting head of state ever charged with genocide by the ICC.
The very first. A landmark moment, really, in international justice. Shows just how severe the allegations were.
But did the arrest warrant actually
Yeah.
work? Did it stop him?
Well, that's the complicated part. Despite the warrants, the serious charges, Bashir operated with quite a bit of impunity for a long time.
He kept traveling internationally.
He did. And, it's quite telling that some major countries, China, Russia, even several African nations, they refused to cooperate with the ICC.
He wouldn't arrest him.
They wouldn't. Some even allowed him official visits. It really highlights the limits and challenges of enforcing international law, doesn't it?
Definitely shows the complexities. How did Bashir frame all this?
As the source material points out, he consistently painted it as politically motivated charges. He portrayed himself as, the defender of Sudan's sovereignty against outsiders.
Standing up to the West, basically.
That was the narrative. Bravely defending Sudan.
So while all this horror was unfolding in Darfur and the legal battles were starting, what else was happening under Bashir? The economy.
Ah, yes. Another really damaging aspect of his rule. Massive economic exploitation and just rampant corruption.
Even though Sudan had oil.
Significant oil resources, yes. But the wealth from that oil, it wasn't going to the Sudanese people, not equitably anyway.
Sounds familiar, sadly. Resource curse.
It echoes patterns seen elsewhere, definitely, where corruption just undermines everything.
So where was the money going?
Our deep dive shows a lot of it was funneled into military spending, keeping the armed forces happy.
And enriching Bashir and his allies.
And enriching Bashir and his close circle, absolutely. Which, of course, led to huge economic inequality and just widespread instability for most ordinary Sudanese people.
And then South Sudan became independent in 2011. That must have hit hard.
Big time. Sudan lost the majority of its oil reserves with that separation. Oil was the main driver of the economy.
It's a massive economic blow.
Huge. Combine that with ongoing international sanctions because of the human rights abuses, and you get this perfect storm. Hyperinflation, soaring unemployment, widespread poverty.
And that fuels public anger, right?
Exactly. That severe economic hardship layered on top of years of corruption and oppression, it really set the stage. It became a major catalyst for the discontent that eventually just boiled over.
Which brings us to 2018.
Yes. That simmering public discontent finally reached its boiling point.
And it started with bread prices, fuel shortages.
That's how it kicked off, yeah. Really fundamental things. But it rapidly grew into this massive nationwide protest movement.
With one clear demand.
And Bashir's rule. After 30 years, people had had enough.
Who was leading these protests?
It was quite remarkable, actually. University students, activists, but also just ordinary citizens, a very broad-based movement.
And the government's response? Predictably harsh.
Very harsh, often violent crackdowns by security forces. But it seemed like the more they cracked down,
the more determined the protesters became.
Exactly. The source material mentions use of live ammunition, mass arrests of opposition figures, but none of it worked. They couldn't stop the uprising.
So what was the final straw? How did he actually fall?
In a really dramatic turn, it was the Sudanese military itself that stepped in.
The military. His own base.
Well, after months and months of these relentless protests that the government just couldn't suppress anymore.
Yes.
In April 2019, the military forced Bashir from power.
Wow, so they removed him.
Removed him, arrested him, put him under house arrest. And just like that, his 30-year rule was over. An end to a really dark, oppressive era for Sudan.
But removing Bashir, that wasn't the end of the story, was it?
No, not at all. In many ways, it was the start of a whole new, very complicated chapter. A political transition that's still frankly, unfolding.
There was that power-sharing deal.
Right, in August 2019, an agreement between the military leaders and the civilian protest leaders. They formed a transitional government
With the goal of...
guiding the country towards democratic elections, an ambitious goal. But as you can imagine, the legacy of Bashir's regime, it just casts such a long shadow.
Still looms large.
Very large. And this situation in Darfur, the genocide designation, that naturally led to continued international pressure for accountability, which brings us back to the ICC.
Absolutely. And with Bashir out of power, the calls for justice must have gotten louder.
Much louder, both inside Sudan and internationally. And then a potentially significant shift happened in 2020. The transitional government indicated it was willing to cooperate fully with the ICC, including potentially handing over Bashir and other wanted officials.
That's a big deal. Did it happen?
It eventually led to a crucial development in 2021. Omar al-Bashir was finally transferred to the custody of the ICC in The Hague.
So he's actually facing trial now.
He is facing trial for those extremely serious charges of genocide committed in Darfur.
After years of impunity.
It's a huge step. But, we have to remember the legal process for cases like this is incredibly complex. It will likely take a long time.
So looking back at this whole period, Bashir's rule, the overall picture is just devastating.
Stark, troubling, tragic, all of those. 3 decades defined by civil war, the genocide in Darfur that shocked the world, and economic collapse that just impoverished the country.
And despite holding power for so long, often through brutality and manipulation,
his legacy is undeniably one of just immense human suffering, oppression, massive human rights violations. Darfur stands as maybe the starkest example.
His fall definitely opens a new chapter for Sudan, a potentially hopeful one.
Potentially. But as our source material really stresses, the path forward towards real justice, towards stability, it remains incredibly challenging.
The wounds are deep.
Very deep. And pursuing accountability, getting justice for the crimes under Bashir, it's such a critical step, not just for the victims and their families who deserve it absolutely, but for the whole country trying to heal.
Yeah. So this deep dive, it really leaves you, the listener, with this stark reminder, doesn't it? The devastating impact when power goes unchecked.
Especially in the hands of one person for so long.
And the absolute moral need to hold people accountable for atrocities.
Mm-hmm.
It forces you to think about the long-term scars, the ones left on a society after enduring that kind of regime, that level of violence.
How does a nation even begin to reconcile and rebuild after that? After mass violence, systemic oppression?
It's a profound question. And what about the rest of us, the global community? What's our actual responsibility beyond just words?
To actively prevent these things.
Yeah.
To intervene. To ensure justice happens.
Yeah. It's this complex web, isn't it? International justice, national sovereignty, the human cost. It demands our attention.